If FIFA says that football was born in China, it's not a joke. More than 2000 years before the Champions League, people were kicking a ball around in ancient China. The game was called suzu, which literally means pushing the ball with the foot. The first mention of Chinese football was in the chronicles of Chang'o-se, the Warring States period around the 4th century BC. The game is associated with the state of Qi in the east of the country. Moreover, back then it was not just a game. Soldiers played suzu to train their endurance and keep their legs in good shape. The ball was made of leather and stuffed with fur or wool. It was the first football with a natural feeling. With the advent of the Han Dynasty, suzu was already popular throughout the country. It is said that Liu Bang himself, the first emperor of the dynasty, was a fan of the game. A special court for suzu was built in the palace where teams of 12 people played. Suzu also had a professional league with both ordinary citizens and court athletes playing. Specialized teams were created at the court. The texts sometimes mention that the game was supposedly invented by the Yellow Emperor, but most likely it was much simpler. The soldiers were bored and resorted to kicking a ball around. By the early Han era, suzu was no longer just a game but a system with its own rules, which were even recorded in writing, creating the first football law in history. The field was square, the ball was already round, but not just randomly. The shape symbolized the Taoist concept of yin and yang, where everything is balanced, even attack and defense. The goal posts were unusual, not the frame with a mesh we're used to, but a small rounded hole. And not just one for each team, but 6 at each end of the field. The chronicles even mention a particularly devoted fan of Chinese football, Xiang Chu. His doctor forbade him from playing because of a hernia, but Xiang Chu did not listen to the doctor. He entered the field and, as they write in the historical records, died right during the game. Kemari, on the other hand, is a Japanese game which appeared around the 7th century and had rules established by the 8th century. They say that the game came from China during the Heian era. Kemari became very popular, especially among the nobility. They played right in the courtyards of temples where hats and formal suits, which today looks more like something aristocratic. Players toss a ball made of deer skin using whatever they can, feet, knees, back, head. The ball was made with fur inside, stuffed with barley, and then sewn with strips of horse skin. George Bush Jr. once played Japanese football, true for diplomatic purposes. Now let's move on to Mesoamerica. Football there would be called Tlachtli, or in Aztec, Ula Molitzli. In that game, scoring a goal was not just important, sometimes someone's life literally depended on it. The game dates back to at least 1600 BC and spread throughout from Nicaragua to Arizona. Ball courts are still being found, more than 3,000 of them are known. The oldest, according to archaeologists, was built around 1400 BC. The courts were always long and narrow, with sloping walls on the sides from which the ball was supposed to bounce. Later, stone rings were installed on these walls, through which the ball had to be thrown, but this is a more complicated version. The ball itself was made of solid rubber, weighing between 3 and 4 kilograms, and this ball was not just played with, but literally hit with the body, hip, elbow and shoulder. Sometimes rackets or sticks were used, depending on the version of the game. The rules varied from region to region, but the basic idea was to not let the ball fall. The game equipment was combat-ready: loincloths, leather belts, knee pads, helmets. In ritualistic versions, heavy decorative clamps weighing up to 30 kilograms were added. In that outfit, the player had to withstand blows from the rubber globe, and it did not always end with just bruises. Some 16th century chronicles describe cases of straight-up death on the court. At the same time, the game had a deep religious meaning. According to the Maya legend, Tlachtli symbolized the struggle between day and night, life and death. Sometimes losers or even the best players were sacrificed, so the final score was not that important. The oldest balls in these areas were found in El Manati. the territory of modern-day Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco. Now the descendants of these cultures play Ulama, a modern version of Tlachtli. The rules resemble volleyball without a net, but the game is based on the old principles, the same heavy balls, the same hip strikes, and same bruises after each game. And now let's go to the Middle Ages. Medieval football was played in Europe from the 12th to the 16th century and was especially popular in England, France, and Italy. There were almost no rules. The teams sometimes had as many as 50 people on each side. Entire villages could play, and anything served as a field. Streets, pastures, rivers. The game lasted for hours, sometimes all day. Some went to kicking the ball, some to knocking teeth. The ball could not only be kicked, but also carried, thrown, pushed, or hit with hands. Sometimes it looked like a brawl, where the ball was just a reason. Unsurprisingly, the English kings did not appreciate the game. Edward II, Edward III, Henry IV tried to ban football officially, not because they did not like the sport, but because it interfered with archers' training. The game was seasonal, most often held on holidays, especially during Easter. There were injuries, there were even deaths, but people continued to go out onto the field. The balls were made out of literally anything. One such medieval ball you can see with your own eyes in Stirling Castle in England. Rumor has it that Mary Stuart herself kicked this ball. We also have a whole another video about footballs and how they evolved, so subscribe and watch that episode, and also check out my episodes from Scotland where I visit Stirling and climb the Tower of William Wallace, the one played by Mel Gibson in the film Braveheart. There's also a video about Edinburgh, its history, places to see, and castle to visit, and even one about the movie Trainspotting, which greatly influenced tourism in the Scottish capital. So subscribe if you haven't already. And if you need advice, visit our website smaps.com. There you can get any info on studying abroad. So, a leather shell, an animal bladder, or just a rolled up lump or fabric, there was no standard for the size, shape, or weight. Same with the rules. In one town, the game was like modern rugby, in another it was just a massive roaring crowd with a ball in the middle. Interestingly, it's from this informal street carnage that later rugby, soccer, and even American football will stem from. Let's talk about where soccer and all the different names for it came from. The word football is the most logical. After all, you literally kick a ball with a foot. The name was established in England in the 19th century when they began to codify mass street games with a ball. In 1863, the Football Association was founded in London, which clearly stated that in this game you cannot take the ball with your hands. This is how what is known as association football, or just football, came about. And that is where the name soccer comes from the association football. In the 1880s, Oxford creative students came up with the terms rugger for rugby football and soccer as a shortening for association. The term spread beyond the student campus and remains a common descriptor in countries with other types of football. When football made its way to the USA, the word soccer turned out to be especially convenient so as not to confuse it with American football, which has its own ball and its own rules. Despite the name, they only use their feet in certain cases, but it all started with football as such. In the 19th century, two British games, rugby and football, were popular at US universities, but American students decided to start playing their own way. They took the ball, ran with it, knocked down opponents, and gradually established their own logic of the game. The rules varied from campus to campus, but it was out of this chaos that American football was born. In 1869, the first recorded game was between Princeton University and Rutgers University, but it was still a hybrid of soccer and rugby. In 1880s, a man named Walter Camp, a player and coach at Yale University, entered the game. He's considered the father of American football. Camp removed rugby's crowding, added line plays and positions such as quarterback, and thus the foundation of the game was created. In 1920, the NFL, the National Football League, emerged, and over the course of 100 years it has become a real industry with billion-dollar budgets and an army of fans. Every NFL final, the Super Bowl, is now watched by tens of millions of viewers around the world, even those who don't really understand the rules. Rugby comes from England. According to legend, in 1823, during a football match, a student from a school of the town of Rugby grabbed the ball with his hands and ran with it. Yes, he broke the rules, but in the end, it was this episode that started a new game. Overall, until mid-19th century, football was a somewhat chaotic game. Each English school played in its own way. Some allowed to take the ball with your hands, some only with your feet, some allowed you to slide under your opponent, and some only slightly push them with your shoulder. When teams from different schools tried to play with each other, they ended up arguing whose rules are more important. And in 1863, representatives of several schools and clubs got together in London to finally come to an agreement. That's how the Football Association came into being, and with it, the first official rules, and the main of which is that you cannot touch the ball with your hands. Those who really wanted to went to play rugby. The role of a goalkeeper came a little later. At first, it was just a player who happened to be closer to the goal. It was only in 1871 that one person on a team was officially allowed to catch the ball with their hands. That's how the goalkeeper appeared. The referee at first sat in the stands. He was somewhere on the side, just in case of conflict, but conflicts happened often, so the referee eventually came onto the field, then received the whistle and later became the full owner of the match. Penalty cards came about in 1960s because of the language barrier. It is difficult to explain to a foreign player what exactly they have violated. That's where colors come to the rescue. It all started with one incident at the 1966 World Cup. England played Argentina in the quarterfinals. German referee Rudolf Kreitlein demanded that Argentine captain Antonio Ratin leave the field for unsportsmanlike conduct. But Ratin remained standing, not because he wanted to riot, he simply did not understand what they wanted from him at all. Kreitlein spoke German, Ratin spoke Spanish. As you already understand, they couldn't find a common language. The referee gestured one thing, the player shouted another. This incident was particularly memorable for another ref, Englishman Ken Aston. A few days later, while driving through London, he stopped at the red light and it dawned on him. Why not use the same system, but for football? Yellow for warning, red for removal. Everything's clear without translation or explanation. 4 years later, at the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, this system was officially introduced into the game. It was the first World Cup with color television coverage, and yellow and red cards fit perfectly into the new football picture. Now the referee's decision was visible not only to the players but also to the fans in the stands, watching TV or elsewhere. The 11-on-11 format didn't appear right away either, it came from a university tradition. That's how many guys were usually accommodated in one dormitory premises. So, in essence, each dorm block was a ready-made football team. But there is also a version that the football players simply decided to go with the same number of participants as in cricket. Since we're having a football history episode, it's worth remembering that before football was played with feet, it was played with anything. For example, in ancient Rome, there was a game called Harpastum, which was so popular that matches were held right in the bathhouses to warm up the body before the hot water. The rules were simple. There was a ball player, a fight for possession of the ball, and judging the descriptions, it was something between football, rugby and a friendly fight. The participants were not pitted, but at the same time it was a respected sport. Posidonius, an ancient Greek writer, called Harpastum a game worthy of a philosopher, and the Roman physician Galen considered it more beneficial than running or wrestling, saying that it uses the entire body, does not take up much time, and is free. The Romans did not invent Harpastum from scratch, they borrowed the game from the Greeks. It was called Episkyros. It also involved a ball wrestling and was a team contest. But since they were the Greeks, they played mostly naked because, classics and antiquity. The ball was called folis, the first ones were made from fabric sewn with ropes and they had little springiness. Later, balls began to be made from pig bladders wrapped in leather. It was nothing like an Adidas football, of course, but it was quite good at a start. It is believed that it was the Greeks who created the game mechanics with passes, wrestling, and even something like a field. And FIFA officially recognized Episkyros as the ancestor of modern football, and in the new era, football itself came back to Greece through the English and the end of the 19th century. The first clubs were opened in Smyrna, now Izmir, and after the war in 1919-1922, they moved to Athens. The names still sounds good today, Panionis and Apollo Smyrni. Well, if you like this episode, subscribe to this channel. Also, visit our website maps.com to find a school for yourself or language courses abroad, or go with us to a language summer camp. Our consultants are always happy to answer your questions, and see you in the next videos.